As a scholar who has dedicated a lifetime to the profound teachings that flowed from a single night of awakening, I find that no event in the spiritual history of humanity is more significant, more deeply analyzed, or more central to the liberation of sentient beings than the moment the seeker Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha. This was not merely a personal achievement, it was, in the Buddhist understanding, a universal discovery. It was the moment a human being, through his own unparalleled effort and penetrating insight, broke through the beginningless cycle of suffering and rediscovered a timeless path to freedom. The story of this enlightenment, which unfolded under the boughs of a pipal tree in what is now Bodh Gaya, India, is the very heart of the Buddhist tradition. It is an epic narrative of inner struggle, profound discovery, and ultimate victory. To truly understand this moment, however, is to understand that it was not a singular, instantaneous flash of divine revelation. Rather, it was the culmination of a systematic and arduous process, an unfolding of direct, experiential knowledge that took place over the course of a single, world-altering night. It was a journey from the final rejection of a flawed path, through a heroic internal battle against the very forces of delusion, to a sequential, ever-deepening realization of the fundamental laws that govern all existence. In this exploration, we will move beyond the simple, serene image of a man sitting under a tree. We will delve into the critical prelude that made the final effort possible, dissect the rich psychological drama of the conquest of Mara, and trace the step-by-step unfolding of the threefold knowledge during the watches of that fateful night. We will seek to comprehend not just the story of the Enlightenment, but the profound philosophical and psychological truths within it. For the story of the moment the Buddha found enlightenment is nothing less than a detailed blueprint of the mind's capacity to awaken to its own true nature and achieve the deathless state of nirvana. The moment Buddha found enlightenment. Part 1. The turning point, from asceticism to the middle way. The final, successful ascent to enlightenment was preceded by a profound and necessary failure. For 6 grueling years, the Bodhisattva Siddhartha had walked the path of extreme asceticism, a path well trodden by the spiritual seekers, sramanas, of his time. The underlying philosophy was one of radical dualism, the belief that the spirit could be liberated from its fleshly prison only by punishing and subjugating the body. Siddhartha pursued this path with a ferocious determination that outstripped all his companions. He subjected himself to unimaginable austerities, extreme fasting until his body was a skeletal ruin, holding his breath until he felt excruciating pain, sleeping on beds of thorns, and enduring the extremes of heat and cold. He pushed his body to the very brink of death, yet he found himself no closer to the truth. His mind, far from becoming luminous and clear, was clouded by weakness and pain. This period of intense self-mortification, though ultimately a dead end, was not a waste. It was a critical experiment that allowed him to realize, with the unshakable certainty of direct experience, that this extreme was not the way. A tortured body could not support the sustained mental energy required for the deep inquiry he sought. He had already known the other extreme, the life of sensual indulgence in his father's palace, and had found it equally fruitless, binding one to the very world of fleeting pleasures that cause suffering. The critical turning point came with a simple, life-affirming act. Near death from starvation, he accepted a humble offering of milk rice from a village girl named Sujata. This act was a moment of profound insight. His 5 ascetic companions, seeing him eat solid food, abandoned him in disgust, believing he had given up the quest. But Siddhartha had not given up. He had discovered the central principle of his future teaching, the middle way, Majjhima Patipada. He realized that the path to awakening lay in a balanced approach that avoided both the extreme of sensual indulgence and the extreme of self-mortification. The body was not an enemy to be conquered, but a precious vehicle to be cared for, nourished just enough to provide a stable and healthy foundation for the far more difficult work of purifying the mind. Nourished and with his strength returning, he bathed in the Narahara River and made his way to a pleasant grove in Gaya. There he saw a pipal tree, later to be known as the Bodhi tree, or Tree of Awakening. He took a handful of grass from a grass cutter and prepared a seat for himself at the foot of the tree. It was here, with his mind now clear on the path he must take, that he made one of the most powerful vows in spiritual history. an expression of unwavering resolve known as an adhithana. Let my skin and sinews and bones dry up, and my flesh and blood dry in my body. But I will not rise from this seat until I have attained full enlightenment. With this heroic determination, he sat down in the lotus posture, turned his face to the east, and entered into meditation. He had abandoned the wrong path, discovered the correct one, and now, with an unbreakable will, he prepared for the final confrontation, a battle not against any external foe, but against the deepest forces of his own mind. Part 2. The Night of Battle, the Conquest of Mara. As the Bodhisattva sat in deep meditation, sinking his consciousness deeper into the fabric of reality, he faced his final and greatest ordeal. This was the legendary battle with Mara. To understand the Enlightenment, it is crucial to understand that Mara is not a literal, pitchfork-wielding demon from a subterranean hell. Mara is a powerful and sophisticated personification of the totality of conditioned existence. He is the Lord of Samsara, the master of illusion, the embodiment of death, desire, and delusion. More pointedly, Mara is the personification of the ego self and all the psychological forces that sustain it, our attachments, our fears, our doubts, and our deep-seated clinging to a sense of I. The conquest of Mara is the story of the silencing of the ego, the final victory over the internal tyrant that holds us all in bondage. The epic battle, as described in texts like the Lalitavistara and Asvaghos's Buddhakarita, unfolds in 3 distinct assaults, each targeting a fundamental vulnerability of the unawakened mind. First assault, the attack of desire, Tana. Mara's first strategy was to break Siddhartha's concentration with the lure of sensual pleasure. He summoned his 3 breathtakingly beautiful daughters, traditionally named Tana, craving, Arati, aversion, boredom, and Raga, lust. They danced seductively before the Bodhisattva, employing all their charms to entice him back to a life of worldly pleasure. But Siddhartha's mind, now firmly established on the middle way and purified by his resolve, remained unmoved. He saw through the alluring forms to the underlying reality of their impermanence and the suffering inherent in attachment. He recognized them not as objects of delight, but as manifestations of the very craving he sought to extinguish. Defeated, they retreated in shame. Second assault, the attack of fear, Bhaya. Seeing that lust had failed, Mara turned to its opposite, fear and aversion. He summoned a terrifying, monstrous army, a legion of demons wielding every imaginable weapon, their faces twisted in rage. They unleashed a storm of fire, rocks, and darkness upon the seated figure. This assault represents the arising of all our deepest fears, our anger, our anxieties, and our hatred. It is the ego's violent reaction to being threatened. Yet, as this hurricane of terror approached the Bodhisattva, a miracle occurred. The flaming weapons, the sharp arrows, and the hurled mountains, upon entering the aura of his immense and unconditional loving kindness, metta, transformed into a gentle shower of lotus blossoms. He felt no fear, only a profound compassion for these beings who were themselves driven and tormented by the poison of hatred. This powerfully illustrates a core Buddhist teaching, that loving kindness is the only true antidote to fear and animosity. A mind suffused with metta is an impenetrable shield. Third assault, the attack of doubt and the ego self. Mara, having failed with both the carrot of desire and the stick of fear, launched his final, most insidious attack. He appeared before Siddhartha and challenged his very right to seek enlightenment. This seed of enlightenment is mine, Mara proclaimed. You are a mere mortal. What right have you to claim the ultimate prize? You have no one to bear witness to your worthiness, while my demonic hordes are my witnesses. This is the ultimate assault of the ego. It is the voice of self-doubt, the inner critic, the feeling of unworthiness. It is the final stand of the I, the sense of a separate self trying to reassert its own dominion. In this critical moment, the Bodhisattva did not engage in a debate. He did not argue about his qualifications or list his virtues. To do so would have been to engage Mara on the ego's own terms. Instead, he performed a simple, silent, and profoundly eloquent gesture that has been immortalized in Buddhist art as the Bhumisparsa mudra, the earth-touching gesture. He slowly lowered his right hand from his lap and touched the ground. This gesture was a silent declaration. He was not calling upon a god, an angel, or any external savior. He was calling upon the earth itself, the vast, impersonal, ultimate reality, to bear witness. He was bearing witness not to his personal worthiness, but to the eons of compassionate, selfless actions, paramitas, he had cultivated through countless lifetimes, which had led him to this very spot. His claim was not based on ego, but on the impersonal law of karma. The legends say the earth itself roared in response, "I am your witness," and trembled, causing Mara and his entire army to be swept away like a flood. The conquest of Mara was complete. The ego had been seen through. Its temptations and threats rendered powerless. The bodhisattva's mind was now perfectly calm, clear, unshakable, and luminous, an instrument perfectly honed for the final task of seeing reality as it is. Part 3. The Dawn of Knowledge, the Three Watches of the Night. With the internal battle won and his mind completely purified, the bodhisattva began the systematic process of discovery that constitutes the core of his enlightenment. This unfolded in three distinct phases, corresponding to the three watches of the night. These are the three true knowledges, Tavya, a sequential unfolding of direct, experiential insight. First watch, evening, knowledge of past lives, Pubbanavasanusati Jnana. In the first watch of the night, from roughly 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., the bodhisattva directed his perfectly concentrated mind to the recollection of his own past existences. This was not a vague memory or a hypnotic regression. It was a direct, vivid, and comprehensive perception of hundreds of thousands of his previous lives. He saw himself in every conceivable condition, as a human of every caste and station, as an animal, as a god in the heavens, Deva, and as a being in the hell realms, Naraka. The significance of this knowledge was not nostalgic or self-aggrandizing. It was the direct, experiential realization of the sheer scale and futility of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. He saw, in his own personal history, the relentless and repetitive nature of existence driven by ignorance and craving. He saw how every pleasure was fleeting, every status impermanent, and every life ended in death, leading only to another birth and another round of the same unsatisfying experiences. This first knowledge was the profound, personal verification of the first noble truth, that conditioned existence is fundamentally characterized by suffering, dukkha. Second watch, midnight, the divine eye, Dibakaku Jnana. In the second watch, from roughly 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., he expanded his consciousness outward, beyond his own personal history, to perceive the arising and passing away of all sentient beings throughout the cosmos. With this divine eye, he saw the universal law of karma in action. He saw how beings' wholesome and unwholesome actions, their deeds, words, and thoughts, directly conditioned their future rebirths. He saw how actions rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion led to rebirth in states of suffering, and how actions rooted in generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom led to rebirth in more fortunate states. This was the direct perception of the impersonal, unerring law of moral cause and effect. It was the answer to the age-old question of why there is injustice and inequality in the world. It was not the whim of a god or random chance, but the direct result of each being's own past actions. This insight did not lead to a sense of righteous judgment, but to a feeling of immense and boundless compassion, karuna. He saw how beings, blinded by ignorance of this law, perpetually created the conditions for their own suffering, like moths flying into a flame. This second knowledge was the deep, experiential understanding of the second noble truth, the origin of suffering, samudaya. Third watch, pre-dawn, knowledge of the destruction of the cankers, asavakaya jnana. In the third and final watch, as the morning star rose in the sky, the bodhisattva turned his now supremely powerful and compassionate mind to the ultimate question. Having understood the what, the suffering of samsara, and the why, the law of karma, he now sought the how. What is the precise mechanism that drives this entire process? And how can it be brought to an end? This inquiry led him to the discovery of the most profound of all his teachings, dependent origination, patikasamuppada. He saw with pristine clarity the 12-link chain of causation that explains how suffering arises and is perpetuated. He saw that at the very root of the entire process is ignorance, avidya, the fundamental misperception of reality. Specifically the belief in a solid, separate self. He saw how this ignorance gives rise to volitional formations, sankhara, which in turn conditions consciousness, vijnana, and so on through the chain, leading to craving, tanha, clinging, upadana, becoming, bhava, and finally to birth, jati, which inevitably brings with it aging and death, jaramarana, and the whole mass of suffering. Crucially, he also saw the chain in reverse. He saw that with the complete cessation of ignorance, volitional formations cease. With the cessation of volitional formations, consciousness ceases, and so on, until the entire chain of suffering unravels. This direct, penetrating insight into dependent origination was the ultimate breakthrough. It was the simultaneous realization of the remaining noble truths. The truth that the cessation of suffering, nirodha, was possible. And the truth of the path, magga, that leads to that cessation. At that moment, the texts say, the deepest, most subtle defilements of the mind, the cankers, or outflows, asavas, were utterly destroyed. These are the canker of sensual desire, kamasava, the canker of desire for existence, bhavasava, and the canker of ignorance, avyasava. With their destruction, his mind was completely and irreversibly liberated. Conclusion. The nature of the awakened state. As the sun rose on the full moon day of Vesak, the man Siddhartha Gautama was no more. In his place sat the Buddha, a title, not a name, which means, the awakened one. He had not become a god, nor had he merged with a creator being. He had awakened to the true nature of reality, a potential that exists within all beings. The state he had reached is nirvana, in Pali. Nibbana, the word literally means, to extinguish, or, to blow out. What was extinguished were the fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance that fuel the cycle of suffering. It is not an annihilation of the self, for he had discovered there was no solid self to annihilate in the first place. It is an unconditioned, deathless state of supreme peace, unshakable mental freedom, profound wisdom, and boundless compassion. The tradition records that upon his full awakening, the Buddha uttered a famous verse of victory, udana, a triumphant cry that encapsulates his discovery. Through many a birth in samsara have I wandered, seeking, but not finding, the builder of this house. Sorrowful is it to be born again and again. O house builder, you are seen, you shall build no house again. All your rafters are broken, your ridgepole is shattered. My mind has reached the unconditioned, achieved as the end of craving. The house is the prison of conditioned existence. The ego self built and rebuilt in life after life. The house builder is craving, tanha, itself born of ignorance. In seeing the builder, he had dismantled the structure forever. The moment of the Buddha's enlightenment was therefore not a passive reception of grace, but an active discovery born of immense effort, heroic resolve, and penetrating, systematic inquiry. It was the ultimate testament to human potential. It was the discovery of a universal law and a universal path. A discovery so profound and so compassionate that its new possessor would, after a brief hesitation, spend the next 45 years of his life walking the roads of India to share it with the world. The moment under the Bodhi tree was not an end to a story, but the true and luminous beginning of a teaching that would echo through millennia, inviting all beings to awaken.